On to a different price story here. Your grocery store bill. It could be a little bit higher because of Trump's tariffs, where a long list of products could suddenly become much pricier.
Can you imagine going to the supermarket one day and not being able to buy beef, lettuce, or even something as simple as a bottle of cooking oil? It might sound far-fetched, but that's exactly the reality approaching as the United States enters a consumption recession caused directly by tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on imports from Mexico, Canada, and Europe. Prices have surged by 30 to 60%, and many items have temporarily disappeared from shelves, especially perishable fresh products that rely almost entirely on imports. The wealthy can manage. Those with low incomes cannot, as food becomes extremely expensive and nearly impossible to find without a stable financial source. When a bag of packaged salad jumps from $3 to $6, or a strawberry smoothie loses all of its ingredients, workers are forced to choose, eat enough or spend enough. And even more surprising, item number 10 on this list is something familiar that you still use every single day. Amid rising living costs, eggs have become one of the most talked about items in the United States. A dozen large white eggs that once cost just a few dollars are now being sold for an average of over $6 as of this past March. According to several reports from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, this price is double the long-term average. What is noteworthy is that even though wholesale prices began to decline toward the end of the month, the average price paid by consumers continued to rise. The reason may lie in the delay between market changes and the reactions of retailers. Some experts believe that stores might not have adjusted prices immediately, leading to a significant gap between expectations and reality. However, the role of avian influenza in the current situation cannot be ignored. According to information from several international animal disease monitoring organizations, since 2022, hundreds of millions of poultry in the United States have been culled to prevent the spread of the virus. Some current preventive policies require the entire flock to be destroyed if a single infected case is found. This directly affects the egg supply, as the loss of each flock means thousands of eggs can no longer be produced. In addition, consumer demand has surged, especially during holidays such as Easter. According to information from agricultural industry organizations, this time of year always sees a dramatic spike in egg consumption. Therefore, the short-term rise in prices, despite a slight dip in mid-March, is easy to understand. In some areas, people have reported egg prices reaching $12 per dozen. Many families have been forced to limit their purchases or switch to alternatives. Restaurant chains like Denny's and Waffle House have also had to adjust their menus, adding surcharges to egg-based dishes in response to price fluctuations. Notably, according to some sources, a recent statement by former President Donald Trump claiming that egg prices had dropped significantly sparked widespread debate, especially as supermarket realities show the exact opposite. Several media outlets reported that although wholesale prices showed signs of decline, retail prices have still increased by as much as 75% compared to the same period last year. At several recent public events, Trump continued to emphasize the use of real eggs during the White House Easter celebration, despite recommendations from environmental and consumer advocacy groups to use alternatives amid the ongoing shortage. The combination of disease outbreaks, high consumer demand, and shifting trade policies has turned eggs from a common food item into a source of significant stress for Americans, particularly for middle and low-income families. As prices show no sign of stabilizing in the long term, many people are being forced to reconsider their consumption habits to adapt to the new reality. If eggs were once the white gem of breakfast, then beef is the red pillar of every main meal. And now that the gem has become hard to find, it's time to look at the pillar. Can it remain steady in the midst of the current price storm? While the majority of beef consumed in the United States is domestically sourced, a significant portion still comes from abroad. According to data released by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, approximately 8 to 20% of the beef supply is imported, with the rest produced domestically. However, one notable detail is that up to 3/4 of Canada's beef exports are sent to the United States. According to information from a North America-based agricultural news outlet, this means that this large volume of imported beef could be subject to tariffs as high as 25% if new tariff policies are implemented. Some sources suggest that products such as imported steaks, tenderloin, or ground beef from Canada will be heavily impacted. In the city of Chicago, once famed as a meatpacking hub, people still flock to renowned restaurants to enjoy the city's signature burgers. One of them is Au Cheval, known for its cheeseburger with egg, often considered the best in the world. However, the price of this beloved dish is steadily climbing. Eggs have already become expensive due to a supply crisis, while beef prices have quietly risen over the years. Some believe that if Trump's tariff policies are enforced, consumers will end up paying even more for their familiar meals. From the steak on the plate to the cold beer in hand, the American ideal of a perfect dinner is now being shaken by each new wave of tariffs. As meat becomes more expensive, one has to wonder if that glass of beer beside it will still be so easy to raise. Among the most popular beverages in the United States, beer imported from Mexico holds a significant market share. According to Sharma Sikar, a senior expert at an international supply chain consulting firm, the southern neighbor is currently the largest supplier of beer to the U.S. market, accounting for more than 60% of total beer imports. Well-known brands such as Corona, Modelo, and Dos Equis are expected to be affected if a 25% import tariff is applied. In addition, according to some economics professors at various universities, other beverages like wine, tequila, and canned soft drinks may also see higher prices due to indirect impacts from rising raw material costs and aluminum tariffs. Specifically for beer, some forecasts suggest that the price of a six-pack of Corona could increase by nearly $50. While large brands might be able to absorb the increase, small craft breweries will face greater difficulty due to already thin profit margins. If this tariff policy goes into effect, the U.S. beverage market will enter a particularly challenging period. When a cold beer is no longer so easy to order, many people reluctantly glance at the menu and settle for a barbecue to lift their mood. But alas, once the grill is fired up, they quickly realize that canola oil, the key to keeping meat from sticking to the pan, is also quietly becoming a hidden luxury in American kitchens. As the traditional American grilling season approaches, many families begin preparing essential ingredients for their outdoor feasts. Among these is canola oil, which is commonly used for high-temperature cooking to prevent food from sticking to pans or grill grates. However, according to several agricultural experts, consumers should brace themselves for the possibility of a significant price increase in the near future. According to a report by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the majority of canola oil imports currently originate from Canada, accounting for more than 90% of total imports. This makes the product particularly vulnerable to new trade policies. Meanwhile, some sources also indicate that upcoming tariff policies may include edible oil products from the European Union, which supplies more than 70% of the olive oil used in the United States. An analysis published on the Western Producer website states that canola oil prices have risen significantly in recent years due to the reliance on Canadian supply and increasing demand in U.S. biofuel production. However, a major shift in the renewable material evaluation system in the United States has led to canola oil no longer being considered as environmentally friendly as before. A new carbon life cycle assessment tool called GREET is now used to determine emissions efficiency, and under this system, canola fails to meet the standard because its cultivation requires nitrogen-based fertilizers, which result in higher greenhouse gas emissions. Some industry sources suggest that if the new U.S. tariff policy is implemented starting in April, combined with the removal of canola oil from the list of prioritized raw materials, it will not only impact the renewable fuel industry, but also the food sector. Canada has increased its canola oil exports to the U.S. to over 3 million tons per year, mainly to supply biofuel refineries. However, if current conditions are not adjusted, this export volume could face a significant decline. In addition, the market for byproducts such as canola meal is encountering major barriers from both China and the United States. Some experts have expressed concern that without alternative strategies or negotiated adjustments, American consumers may have to pay a higher price for the familiar bottles of canola oil in their kitchens. Cooking oil is already becoming harder to afford, but lettuce is surprising people even more. A staple in the daily shopping basket is now either missing from the shelves or, if available, carries a price tag far less friendly than before. Lettuce, though not a luxury item, plays an essential role in the daily meals of millions of Americans. However, according to assessments from industry experts such as Mr. Shayashik, this familiar vegetable is facing the risk of a sharp price increase, one that could make it difficult for many low-income families to maintain their usual diets. He noted that over 95% of the lettuce consumed during the winter in the United States is imported, primarily from Mexico. With a 25% tariff in place, the price of a head of romaine lettuce could rise from $1.20 to $1.50 or more. For prepackaged salads, the impact is even greater due to additional transportation and storage costs. As the economy grapples with fluctuations brought on by the new tariff policies, buying lettuce at a reasonable price may soon become a distant prospect for those without a stable financial foundation. It might seem like only greens are struggling to hold their place on the dinner table, but even sweet treats like maple syrup are gradually becoming a luxury. A small drizzle on morning pancakes now makes many people think twice. Maple syrup has long been intertwined with American culinary culture, appearing in traditional breakfasts, pancakes, and even industrial products like cereals or packaged foods. However, this once familiar sweetener is now gradually becoming a luxury item, especially for households with unstable incomes. The reason is believed to stem from the newly proposed tariff policy, coupled with a heavy reliance on supply from Canada. According to figures released by several international trade analysis agencies, although the United States is the second largest exporter of maple products in the world, it still imports 7 times the value of what it exports, totaling nearly $250 million annually. Canada plays a dominant role as the main supplier, accounting for over 70% of global production, with nearly all processed products coming from the Quebec region. This means that any fluctuations in trade policy affecting the northern neighbor directly impact the price and accessibility of this item in the United States. Mr. Jim Judd, a longtime producer in Vermont, shared with several local newspapers that maple syrup production is already heavily dependent on the unpredictable weather conditions of spring. Now, changes in import tariffs have significantly increased production costs. According to him, each barrel of syrup requires components from all over the world. From equipment imported from Canada to packaging from Europe and tools from Asia, every detail is affected when these goods fall under the new tariff list. This situation is making maple syrup not only scarce but also priced beyond the reach of many families. According to several sources published in media outlets such as the Brattleboro Reformer and local trade bulletins, the tariff policy under President Donald Trump is currently causing significant confusion in the food industry. Although finished maple syrup products have not yet been directly taxed, input components, from production equipment to raw materials, are now facing new trade barriers. This has led many small producers in Vermont, New York, and Maine into financial losses, or has prevented them from expanding production as originally planned. Ms. Allison Hope, head of a production association in Vermont, stated that in the context of constantly changing and unstable policies, setting long-term direction for the industry is almost impossible. Meanwhile, American consumers are witnessing syrup prices rise week after week, and in many grocery stores, the product has already begun to disappear from shelves, especially in low-income residential areas. When incomes fail to keep pace with rising prices and import policies continue to tighten, maple syrup may no longer remain a familiar part of many Americans' breakfasts. Instead, it risks becoming a symbol of a difficult era, where what was once familiar is now far out of reach. As the sweetness of maple syrup grows increasingly costly, even the familiar richness of avocados is prompting second thoughts. Once a popular choice for a healthy breakfast, now just a slice spread on toast is becoming something many families can no longer easily afford. In the United States, avocados have long been a popular nutritional choice for breakfast, especially among those who follow a healthy lifestyle. However, today, this item has become a luxury food for many households, particularly in the context of an economy showing signs of recession, partly due to the impact of the new tariff policies announced by the Trump administration. According to sources from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 90% of the avocados consumed in the U.S. are imported from Mexico. This makes avocados highly sensitive to any fluctuations in international trade. Several reports indicate that avocado prices have surged in many supermarkets recently. The cause is not only the reduced supply due to severe weather conditions in key exporting countries like Mexico, Peru, or Chile, but also because trade barriers have significantly raised import costs. For low-income families, maintaining the daily habit of eating avocados has now become a luxury. In fact, in some urban areas, consumers report that avocados no longer appear regularly on store shelves. According to a recent international study, if climate change trends and import tariff policies continue unadjusted, global avocado cultivation areas could shrink by up to 40% in the coming decades. This could turn the once popular fruit into an inaccessible commodity, available only to those with stable financial means in an era of economic uncertainty. Avocados have become hard to buy, but strawberries are making many people reconsider. Once an easily found fruit during shopping trips, now just looking at the price is enough to make many people put it back on the shelf. Strawberries are a popular fruit in the United States, especially during the late spring and summer months. However, in winter, when the domestic climate is no longer suitable for cultivation, most of the supply must rely on Mexico. According to data published by the Packer magazine, up to 85% of the strawberries available on the U.S. market during the cold season come from this country. Some trade sources suggest that if import tariffs are raised, strawberry prices could increase by 20 to 30%. According to expert Shea Sheikh, not only will retail prices be affected, but short-term supply may also be disrupted, especially if transportation and customs clearance processes experience delays. This situation makes it more difficult for middle-income families to access this fruit as they once could. After seeing the price of strawberries and deciding to pass, many people turn to search for other sources of protein for their meals. However, even salmon, a nutritious food that was once common in many households, is no longer as easy to purchase as it once was. Salmon has long been a popular choice for many Americans due to its high nutritional value, particularly its omega-3 content, which is beneficial for heart and brain health. However, amidst the U.S. economy facing the threat of recession due to the impact of the new import tariff policies from the Trump administration, this food is gradually becoming a luxury. According to some sources in the supply chain industry, more than 96% of imported salmon comes from Canada and is now subject to a 25% tariff. It is expected that prices could rise by at least 10%, forcing many families with limited income to reconsider their consumption habits. In supermarkets across many states, a number of people have reported that salmon is gradually disappearing from the shelves or only appearing at prices beyond their means. If salmon is beyond reach, many people will think of simpler foods like tomatoes. But even this common kitchen staple is starting to become harder to find, and its prices are no longer as friendly as before. Tomatoes have long been an essential part of the American diet. From pasta sauces and daily salads to simple breakfasts, This fruit is always present in the kitchens of most households. However, in the context of an economy facing many fluctuations, particularly due to the new import tariff policies being implemented, tomatoes are gradually becoming a luxury item for many consumers, especially middle-income households. According to data from the Economic Complexity Observatory, the United States is the largest importer of tomatoes in the world, with a total annual import value exceeding $3 billion. A report by expert Sharma Seeker states that almost all of the tomatoes imported into the U.S. today come from Mexico and Canada. Of this, Mexico alone provides nearly 70% of the total tomato consumption in the United States. Any trade barriers with this country will directly affect prices and consumer access. Starting in July, unless a new trade agreement is signed, fresh tomatoes from Mexico will face significant additional tariffs. According to some media sources, such as the Wall Street Journal, this could cause tomato prices to skyrocket in a manner similar to the egg price crisis earlier this year, when a dozen eggs soared above $6 due to the impact of avian flu and supply chain disruptions. Some producers, such as NatureSweet, which owns farming operations in both the U.S. and Mexico, have stated that their company may have to pay over $1 million per week just for import tariffs. A study sponsored by the company last year showed that if the entire tomato supply from Mexico were to be disrupted, retail prices in the U.S. could increase by up to 50%. In fact, the average price for a liter of cherry tomatoes has now reached $2.48. If a tariff of more than 20% is applied, the cost could rise sharply, making tomatoes difficult to access for families with limited budgets. Some experts in agriculture and trade have shared that the new trade regulations are placing a heavy burden on ordinary consumers. Items that were once everyday foods are now becoming difficult choices, especially when the economy has not fully recovered and people are forced to cut back on spending for essential goods. In this context, tomatoes are gradually moving away from being a familiar dish to becoming a symbol of profound changes in the lives of Americans under the influence of new trade policies. When items like eggs and tomatoes can disappear from store shelves, it is not just about the prices, but a clear signal that people's lives are under more pressure than ever. 10 familiar items, once essential in daily meals, are now becoming luxuries if you do not have a stable financial source. And if everything plays out as predicted, shopping for groceries will no longer be a simple task. This is not a warning meant to cause panic, but a reminder for all of us to be proactive and prepare early. All information in this video has been compiled from various news sources and public analysis to provide viewers with a comprehensive overview. We do not represent any organizations or political viewpoints. Viewers are encouraged to conduct further research to make their own assessments and decisions based on their personal circumstances.